Hello class. In this presentation we are going to be introduced to Buddhism. We're going to talk about the major Buddhist texts, and then we are going to end with a discussion of the life of Buddha. So what is Buddhism? So Buddhism is a religion originating in 6th century BCE India during what is called the later Vedic period, and it began as a sect of Hinduism. And Buddhism was founded by Siddhartha Gautama, who lived from the 6th to 5th centuries BCE, and he is also known as Buddha or the Awakened One. Now, one thing to be aware of is that there are, generally speaking, two major types of Buddhism, Theravada and Mahayana. And Theravada Buddhism is the most ancient school of Buddhism, popular in India, Sri Lanka, and Southeast Asia. And Mahayana Buddhism refers to a later Buddhist school of thought, popular in China and Japan. Now, like with Hinduism, there is no central Buddhist Bible, and there are so many different schools of thought and subsects and stuff like that that we really can't cover all of the major sacred texts. So for the purpose of this class, we're going to kind of primarily reference two different types of texts. The Tripitaka and a number of Mahayana sutras, in particular the Lotus Sutra. So the Tripitaka literally means three baskets in Pali Sanskrit, and it is Buddhism's most ancient collection of scripture, containing accounts of the life and teachings of Buddha and his disciples, as well as rules concerning the early religious community, or Sangha. And the Mahayana Sutras are later Buddhist texts of the Mahayana tradition, like the Lotus Sutra, which is a Buddhist text that contains an extensive discussion of the concepts of compassion and skillful means, and it contains the famous parable of the burning house, which we are going to read for class. All right, so with some of that foundational material in mind, let's just talk a little bit about the life of Buddha. And of course, we're talking about the life of Buddha for context to better understand his teachings. And we're also going to find that, kind of like Jesus and Muhammad, Buddha is kind of regarded as the prototypical kind of Buddhist, that his life is one which is worth imitating, in the Buddhist tradition. So Buddha was born in northeast India, or the northeast Indian subcontinent, in what is present-day Nepal. And if you know anything about the region of Nepal, it is a very mountainous region, just to kind of activate your imagination as to where Buddha was from. And there is a story in the Tripitaka that Buddha did experience a miraculous birth. That is, his mother, Queen Maya, had a dream that a white elephant entered her womb. And, oh, well, then what happened next? So Siddhartha's father, King Suddhodana, called his court astrologers, and the majority of his court astrologers said, hey, this is a great sign, meaning that your son is going to be a great king or monarch. But there was one court astrologer who said, no, if your son experiences suffering, that he will become a great monk instead, a great world renouncer. So again, in being consistent with the kind of miraculous birth story, there is this tale that the Buddha was actually born out of his mother's side, as opposed to the normal way in which women give birth. So again, just testimony to kind of the specialness, of his origins. And remember, King Suddhodana, Siddhartha's father, does not want him to experience suffering, so he makes sure that Siddhartha lives this kind of isolated lifestyle, just surrounded by luxury. In his late 20s, Siddhartha does get married, and he and his wife have a son named Rahula. And at the age of 30, Siddhartha basically begs his father to leave the palace, so the father allows it, and he tries to kind of sweep the streets of all the sick and dying and old folks. But nevertheless, on this kind of journey outside of the palace, the chariot driver stops And Siddhartha experiences what are called the four sights. And these are them. That is, Siddhartha first encounters an old man, a sick man, and a dead man, and then the fourth sight is that of a monk. So in the first three encounters, Siddhartha is in despair, he's in shock, he has no idea that, this is the fate that is to become him, that this is the fate of humanity because of his isolation. And then when he sees the fourth sight, or the monk, he says, so this is the path out of suffering. So that same night, after seeing the monk, he gives his wife and son a final look, and he escapes the palace, and he is even tempted by demons to stay. And then he cuts off his princely kind of noble hair, and he dons the clothing of a monk. And so Prince Siddhartha begins this like 5-year spiritual search. And the first thing he does is he seeks out gurus or spiritual teachers, but he is disappointed by their teachings. So he tries to find enlightenment and nirvana through another way. So he joins this group of radical ascetics who basically starve themselves, stand in uncomfortable positions, and the logic is that if you live this kind of radical, like self-denying lifestyle, that somehow it'll kick your mind into, experiencing enlightenment. And Buddha is so passionate about this lifestyle that he becomes emaciated, as is shown kind of in this picture here. And he eventually collapses and he's left for dead by his companions. A local woman does nurse him back to health. And when he is healthy on the road to Benares, he stops and sits under a tree. And that night he vows that he is going to achieve enlightenment and finally discover the end of human suffering. And while he is under the tree, he falls into these 3 trances where he, remembers his past lives. He comes to understand, how the universe functions, realizes Dharma. And he eventually goes into such a deep trance that he achieves, this sense of like ultimate peace or nirvana. Now, before he experiences that ultimate peace, he is tempted by a demon, but the demon is defeated. And it is at this time of this victory that he becomes Buddha, or the awakened one. Buddha's ministry begins when he leaves the tree and he preaches his first sermon, which contains the 4 Noble Truths, which he's so famous for, to his traveling companions who left him for dead. And those companions become the first members of the Sangha, which, as you can see from this illustration, just grows and grows and grows to include monks, nuns, and lay people. And Buddha dies at the age of 80, and this is a famous kind of depiction of the reclining Buddha, which captures the moment before Buddha achieves parinirvana.